Before the fire fell on Carmel, a prophet stood beside a drying brook and learned that the Lord could feed his servant in silence. Before the chariots of fire appeared, two men walked together toward the Jordan, knowing one of them would not return the same way. Before a frightened servant saw the armies of heaven, a prophet prayed that his eyes would be opened. So let the world grow quiet around you now. Let the day loosen its grip. Let your breathing slow. Tonight, we enter the troubled days of Israel, when kings sat in palaces, idols stood on high places, and many hearts forgot the Lord who had brought his people out of Egypt, carried them through the wilderness, and planted them in the land of promise. This is the Shepherd's Bible. Tonight's story is one of fire and silence, drought and rain, hunger and provision, judgment and mercy, loneliness and calling, mantle and river, healing and hidden armies of heaven. It is the story of Elijah and Elisha, prophets of Israel. They lived in days when the word of the Lord was not fashionable, not easy, and not always welcomed. They stood before kings who did not want to listen. They walked lonely roads. They dwelt near dry brooks and in upper rooms, on mountains and beside rivers, in towns where people needed water, food, healing, and hope. Elijah came like a flame in a darkened land. Elisha followed like a steady river after fire, carrying the same holy authority into ordinary houses, borrowed vessels, hungry crowds, sick bodies, fearful servants, and cities under siege. One prophet heard the Lord in fire from heaven. The other saw the Lord's mercy in oil poured into jars, bread multiplied for hungry men, and water made clean for a city. One prophet stood on Carmel, while heaven answered by flame. The other stood at Dothan, while unseen chariots of fire filled the mountains. And through both of them, the same truth remained. The Lord was not absent. The Lord had not forgotten his covenant. The Lord could feed his servant with ravens. He could sustain a widow with a handful of flour and a little oil. He could raise the dead. He could answer by fire. He could speak in the quiet after wind, earthquake, and flame. He could open a river. He could open blind eyes to invisible help. He could make his word live on, even when kings rose and fell like dust in the wind. So settle gently now into this sacred story. Imagine the ancient hills beneath the evening sky, and olive trees silvered by moonlight. Imagine the dry smell of dust after many rainless days. Imagine ravens crossing the pale morning air above a hidden brook. Imagine a widow gathering sticks outside a city gate. Imagine Mount Carmel rising against the sea, its stones waiting for an altar to be repaired. Imagine a weary prophet beneath a broom tree, too tired to pray with polished words, yet still seen by God. Imagine the mountain of Horeb, where the wind passed, and the earthquake passed, and the fire passed, and then came the sound of gentle stillness. Imagine a field where Elisha plowed with 12 yoke of oxen, not knowing that an old life was about to fall from his shoulders like dust, and a new calling would rest upon him like a mantle. Imagine 2 prophets walking towards the Jordan, Gilgal behind them, Bethel behind them, Jericho behind them, the river before them, the sons of the prophets watching from a distance. and then the water parting, and then the sky opening, and then fire, not the fire of destruction, but the fire of heaven's mystery, the chariot, the horses, the whirlwind, the cry of Elisha, the mantle falling. And after that, another life of wonders begins, not hurried, not smaller, not an afterthought. The Spirit who rested upon Elijah now rests upon Elisha, and the story continues with tenderness, power, and quiet wonder. The kingdom grows dark. Long before Elijah stood before Ahab, the kingdom had already been wounded. The people of Israel had once been one nation under David, and then under Solomon. The temple had stood in Jerusalem, and the worship of the Lord had been ordered there with sacrifice, prayer, song, and holy memory. But after Solomon's days, the kingdom divided. Judah remained in the south, with Jerusalem and the temple. Israel stood in the north with its own kings, its own centers of power, and its own long struggle with divided worship. The story does not begin with Elijah's voice. It begins with a people slowly forgetting. It begins with small compromises that became customs, customs that became habits, habits that became loyalties, and loyalties that turned hearts away from the living God. The northern kingdom had kings who often walked in the sins of Jeroboam, the first king who had led Israel away from worship in Jerusalem. Calves of gold had been set up. Shrines had been honored. The people had learned to mix the name of the Lord with practices the Lord had not commanded. What began as political convenience became spiritual drought. Then came Ahab, son of Omri. Ahab reigned over Israel in Samaria, and the scripture remembers him with sorrow. He did evil in the sight of the Lord more than those who were before him. It was not enough that he walked in the sins already established in Israel. He also married Jezebel, daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and he went and served Baal and worshipped him. Ahab built a house for Baal in Samaria. He made an altar there. He made the Asherah, and under his reign the darkness deepened. Jezebel was not merely a foreign queen living quietly in the palace. She brought with her a fierce devotion to Baal, and under her influence this worship gained strength in Israel. The prophets of Baal were fed. The prophets of the Lord were hunted. The land that had been given by covenant began to sound with prayers offered to a false god of storm and fertility, as if rain and harvest belonged to Baal, and not to the Lord who made heaven and earth. The palace in Samaria had its lamps and guards, its halls and servants, its meals and music, its whispers and commands. From a distance it may have seemed secure. Ahab sat on the throne. Jezebel held influence. The altar of Baal stood in its place. The people carried on with planting and trade and household life. Flocks moved over hills. Farmers watched the skies. Children learned the names their parents gave them. Life continued. But beneath the daily rhythm, the land was thirsty in a deeper way. The soil still held seed. The clouds still passed over the great sea. The streams still ran down their familiar paths. But the covenant heart of Israel had become dry. A nation may have water in its cisterns and still be parched in its soul. A people may have harvests in their barns and still be hungry for truth. In those days, Israel's true drought was not first in the fields. It was in the worship of the heart. The Lord had not changed. The Lord had not grown weak. The Lord had not surrendered his people to Baal. But the people had grown confused, divided, and dull. Some still feared the Lord in hidden places. Some prophets remained faithful. Some servants of the palace trembled before God more than they feared the queen. But many had bowed where they should not bow. Many had tried to stand with one foot in covenant and the other in idolatry. It is into such a land that Elijah comes. He does not arrive with long introduction. He does not come from the royal schools. He does not ask for permission. He appears in Scripture suddenly, like thunder over a dry valley. Elijah the Tishbite, of the settlers of Gilead, stands before Ahab and speaks the word of the living God. As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, except by my word. There it is, a sentence like a gate closing over the sky. No dew, no rain. Not because Elijah commands the weather by his own power, but because the Lord, the God of Israel, lives. Not Baal, not the idol of storm, not the god Jezebel honored. The Lord lives, and Elijah stands before him. That is the center of the prophet's courage. He stands before Ahab because he first stands before the Lord. The palace may have had power. Jezebel may have had influence. Ahab may have had soldiers, messengers, horses, and counselors. But Elijah stands before the living God, and the word he carries is not his own. The drought begins as judgment, but also as revelation. The land will learn who gives rain. The king will learn who rules the heavens. The people will learn that divided worship leads to dryness. And Elijah, after speaking before the king, will learn something too. He will learn that the servant of the Lord must sometimes be hidden before he is sent publicly again. He will learn that obedience can lead not first to crowds, but to solitude. He will learn that the Lord who shuts the heavens can also feed one man beside a brook. Elijah and the drought. After Elijah speaks to Ahab, the word of the Lord comes to him again. This time, it is not a word for the king. It is a word for the prophet. Go away from here, turn eastward, and hide yourself by the brook Chariots, which is before the Jordan. You shall drink from the brook. I have commanded the ravens to feed you there. The man who has just stood before the king is sent away from the center of power into concealment. There is a quiet wisdom in that. The Lord does not leave his servant exposed to danger before the appointed time. Nor does he allow Elijah to think that public boldness is the whole of prophetic life. The prophet must speak, yes, but he must also be hidden. He must wait. He must receive. He must depend. So Elijah goes and does according to the word of the Lord. He leaves the places where men can see him. He turns eastward. He goes toward the brook Cherith, somewhere in the lonely country before the Jordan. The land around him grows quieter as he moves away from palace roads and crowded places. The air is dry. The grasses are brittle. The stones hold the heat of day and release it slowly into evening. At night, The sky opens wide above him, full of stars, and the silence of the wilderness gathers like a cloak. There, by the brook, Elijah lives. Water runs over stone, not much perhaps, but enough. The brook, Cherith, becomes his hidden school. No market stalls, no public honor, no comfortable table, no human arrangement that can be praised for cleverness. Only a brook, a prophet, the command of God, and ravens crossing the sky. Morning by morning, the ravens come, bread and meat. Evening by evening, the ravens come again, bread and meat. There is a strange holiness in this provision. Ravens were not gentle songbirds kept in cages near palace windows. They were wild creatures of the air, black-winged, sharp-eyed, moving where God directed them. They did not understand the covenant. They did not know Elijah's fear or calling. Yet the Lord commanded them, and they obeyed according to the mystery of his rule. Elijah receives what they bring. He drinks from the brook. He eats what God provides. Day follows day. The sun rises over dry hills. The brook whispers over stones. The ravens come. The ravens go. And beyond that hidden place, the drought spreads. Fields begin to harden. Wells lower. Dust rises where grass once held the ground. Farmers look toward the sky and find no sign. Shepherds lead flocks farther in search of pasture. Cisterns are watched carefully. Women measure water with anxious hand. Children hear their parents speak in lowered voices about the failing rain. In Samaria, Ahab knows the word Elijah spoke has begun to live in the land itself. In the house of Baal, prayers may be offered, incense may rise, voices may call, but the sky remains closed, and Elijah stays by Cherith. The solitude must have been deep. There are days when God's care does not look abundant. It looks like enough for morning and enough for evening. Bread that must be received again tomorrow. Water that must be drunk today. A hiding place that is safe only because God said, there. Cherith teaches the heart to live one day at a time. Not because tomorrow is unimportant, but because tomorrow belongs to the Lord. Elijah cannot store the ravens. He cannot command the brook. He cannot force the heavens open. He can only remain where God placed him, receive what God sends, and wait until the word comes again. And then, in time, the brook dries up. The scripture says it simply. After a while the brook dried up, because there was no rain in the land. The place of provision becomes the place of emptiness. The stones that once sang with water lie exposed and silent. The shallow pools shrink. The sound of running water grows thin, then thinner, then gone. Elijah watches the brook fail, not because he is disobeyed, but because the drought touches even the place where the prophet hides. Sometimes the brook dries up, even when we are exactly where God told us to be. That does not mean the Lord has forgotten. It means the next word is near, and the next word comes. Arise, go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and live there. Behold, I have commanded a widow there to sustain you. Zarephath, a place beyond Israel's borders. a place connected to the region of Sidon, the world from which Jezebel herself had come. A widow, not a wealthy patron, not a noble household, not a storehouse guarded by soldiers, a widow in a famine. The command must have sounded strange to human ears. But Elijah has already learned something at Chariots. The Lord can feed through ravens. He can sustain through hidden water. He can command provision in forms no man would have chosen for himself. So Elijah rises from the dry brook. He leaves the place where he has been hidden, and he walks toward Zarephath, the widow of Zarephath. The road to Zarephath carries Elijah out of Israel's familiar land and toward the coast, toward a city belonging to Sidon. The drought has not stopped at the border. The sky over Sidon is the same sky the Lord has closed. The hunger spreading through Israel has reached there too. When Elijah comes to the gate of the city, he sees a widow gathering sticks. It is a small scene. No trumpet, no altar, no crowd, no king. Only a woman near the city gate, bending to gather bits of wood from the ground. She does not look like an answer to a prophet's need. She looks like someone in need herself. Her hands search for enough sticks to make one small fire. Her home is quiet with scarcity. She has a son. She has a little flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. Not a hidden reserve. Not enough for many days. Only enough, she believes, for one final meal before death closes in. Elijah calls to her, "Please bring me a little water in a vessel, that I may drink." She turns to go. Even in famine, even in poverty, she is willing to bring water to a stranger. Then Elijah calls again, "Please bring me a morsel of bread in your hand." Now, the sorrow of her house comes into words. "As the Lord your God lives, I don't have a cake, but a handful of meal in a jar, and a little oil in a jar. Behold, I am gathering 2 sticks, that I may go in and bake it for me and my son, that we may eat it and die." There are few sentences in Scripture more quiet and heartbreaking. She does not speak with drama. She speaks with the plain weariness of a woman who has counted what is left and found almost nothing. A handful of flour, a little oil, 2 sticks, a son, a final meal. But Elijah says to her, "Don't be afraid." The words do not deny her poverty. They do not pretend the jar is full. They do not make light of hunger. They come as a command wrapped in mercy. "Go and do as you have said, but make me a little cake from it first, and bring it out to me. Afterward make some for yourself and for your son. For thee, Lord, the God of Israel says, the jar of meal will not run out, and the jar of oil will not fail, until the day that the Lord sends rain on the earth." This is not a demand from a selfish man. It is an invitation into trust. The widow is asked to place the word of the Lord before the visible measure in her hand. She is asked to believe that the God of Israel, though she is in Sidonian territory, sees her house, her hunger, and her son. She goes and does according to the saying of Elijah. That obedience is one of the quiet miracles of the story. Before the flour multiplies, faith moves. Before the oil continues, trust rises. She takes the little she has. She prepares the small cake first for the prophet. She brings it. Then she returns to the jar and the jug, and there is still flour. There is still oil, not overflowing in noisy abundance, not filling the house with gold, not making her suddenly rich in the eyes of the city, but enough for that day, and then enough for the next, and then enough again. The jar of meal does not run out. The jar of oil does not fail. The widow, her son, and Elijah eat for many days. Picture those days gently. The house is still simple. The famine still presses outside. Neighbors still struggle. The sky is still closed. The streets of Zarephath still hold the dust of drought. But inside that small home, an unseen mercy repeats itself. Morning comes. The widow lifts the jar. There is flour. She tips the jug. There is oil. She prepares bread. The prophet eats. The child eats. The mother eats. Evening comes. The jar is not empty. The jug has not failed. The miracle is not loud. It is domestic. It happens in a kitchen, in the ordinary motions of hands that knead and bake. It is a miracle measured not in spectacle, but in meals. God's provision often comes that way, not always as a flood, sometimes as enough to make bread tonight. The widow learns the faithfulness of the Lord not in one grand storehouse, but in the repeated mercy of daily bread. Elijah, too, learns again that the Lord can command provision outside the borders of Israel, in the house of a poor widow, through the small things men overlook. But the story in Zarephath does not remain easy. After these things, the widow's son becomes sick. His illness grows severe, until no breath remains in him. The house that had been preserved from famine is now struck by grief. The mother turns to Elijah in anguish. What have I to do with you, you man of God? You have come to me to bring my sin to memory and to kill my son. Grief often searches for meaning with trembling hands. It reaches backward into old guilt, old fear, old shame. It asks whether suffering is punishment. It wonders whether the presence of holiness has exposed hidden sin. The widow cannot understand why the child who survived hunger has now died in her arms. Elijah does not answer with cold explanation. He says, "Give me your son." He takes the child from her bosom and carries him up into the room where he is staying. He lays him on his own bed. Then Elijah cries to the Lord, "Lord my God, have you also brought evil on the widow with whom I am staying by killing her son?" The prophet's prayer is raw, but reverent. He stretches himself upon the child 3 times and cries again, "Lord my God, please let this child's soul come into him again." The room is still. The mother waits below. The world outside continues beneath the famine sky, and the Lord listens to the voice of Elijah. The life of the child comes into him again. He revives. Elijah takes the child and brings him down from the room into the house. He gives him to his mother and says, "Behold, your son lives." No flourish, no self-praise, no spectacle. Only a mother receiving her living child back into her arms. Then the woman says to Elijah, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the Lord's word in your mouth is truth. The house of Zarephath has become a sanctuary of provision and resurrection. The flour had spoken. The oil had spoken. Now the living child speaks without words. The Lord is not confined to palace, temple, mountain, or border. He is near to the widow. He is near to the child. He is near in hunger. He is near in grief. He is able to sustain life, and he is able to restore it. Fire on Mount Carmel. Many days pass. The drought continues into the 3rd year. Then the word of the Lord comes to Elijah again. Go, show yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the earth. The prophet who had hidden by Cherith and lived in Zarephath is now sent back into danger. Meanwhile, the famine is severe in Samaria. Ahab calls Obadiah, who is over the household. Obadiah fears the Lord greatly. Though he serves in the court of a wicked king, his heart belongs to God. When Jezebel cut off the prophets of the Lord, Obadiah took 100 prophets and hid them by 50s in caves, feeding them with bread and water. Hidden faithfulness exists even in dark palaces. Obadiah is not Elijah. He does not stand in public flame before the nation. His obedience is quieter, riskier in another way. He shelters prophets. He brings bread and water. He uses his position not for pride, but for preservation. Ahab and Obadiah go through the land to search for grass, hoping to keep the horses and mules alive. They divide the land between them. Ahab goes one way. Obadiah goes another. As Obadiah is on the road, Elijah meets him. Obadiah recognizes him and falls on his face. Is it you, my lord Elijah? Elijah answers, It is I. Go, tell your lord, behold, Elijah is here. Fear rises in Obadiah. He knows Ahab has searched for Elijah everywhere. He fears that if he goes to tell the king, the Spirit of the Lord may carry Elijah away, and then Ahab will kill him. Obadiah reminds Elijah of his faithfulness, how he hid the prophets of the Lord from Jezebel. Elijah answers with solemn assurance, As the Lord of armies lives, before whom I stand, I will surely show myself to him today. So Obadiah goes to meet Ahab and tells him. Ahab comes to meet Elijah. And when Ahab sees Elijah, he says, Is that you, you troubler of Israel? Elijah does not accept the accusation. I have not troubled Israel, but you and your father's house, in that you have forsaken the Lord's commandments, and you have followed the Baals. Then Elijah gives the command. All Israel is to be gathered to Mount Carmel, along with the prophets of Baal and the prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. Mount Carmel rises near the sea, green in better seasons, but now touched by the drought that has humbled the land. From its height, one can look toward the waters of the great sea, where clouds might gather if the Lord commanded rain. On that mountain, Israel gathers. The people come. Ahab comes. The prophets of Baal come. Elijah stands before them. The question he asks is not complicated. How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. The people answer him not a word. Silence can reveal as much as speech. The people do not deny the Lord with their mouths in that moment. They simply do not answer. Their hearts have been divided so long that clarity feels dangerous. To choose one way means leaving another. To confess the Lord truly means rejecting Baal fully. Elijah stands alone as the visible prophet of the Lord before the gathered people, while the prophets of Baal are many. He proposes the test. 2 bulls are to be prepared. The prophets of Baal may choose 1 bull, cut it in pieces, lay it on wood, but put no fire under it. Elijah will prepare the other bull and lay it on wood, but put no fire under it. Then they will call on the name of their God, and Elijah will call on the name of the Lord, the God who answers by fire. He is God. The people say, "It is well said." The prophets of Baal go first. They prepare the bull. They call on the name of Baal from morning until noon. "Baal, hear us." But there is no voice. No one answers. They leap around the altar they have made. The day grows hotter. Dust clings to feet. Voices grow hoarse. The sky remains empty. At noon, Elijah speaks with sharpness, exposing the emptiness of the idol. They cry louder. They continue until the time of the evening offering. But there is no voice, no answer, no one who pays attention. That is the tragedy of idolatry. It demands much and gives nothing. It receives devotion and returns silence. It stirs frenzy but cannot send fire. Then Elijah calls the people near. "Come near to me." And all the people come near. This is a tender moment in the middle of a mighty scene. Before the fire falls, the people are invited closer. They are not kept at a distance, as if the altar of the Lord were a secret. They are called to watch the repair. Elijah repairs the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. Stone by stone, the broken place is restored. He takes 12 stones, according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord came, saying, "Israel shall be your name." 12 stones. Even though the kingdom is divided, the covenant memory is whole. The altar says what the people have forgotten. Israel belongs to the Lord. The tribes are not Baal's possession. They are not Jezebel's possession. They are not Ahab's invention. They are the people named by God's covenant mercy. Elijah builds the stones into an altar in the name of the Lord. He makes a trench around it. He puts the wood in order. He cuts the bull in pieces and lays it on the wood. Then he commands that 4 jars be filled with water and poured on the burnt offering and on the wood. They do it. He says, "Do it a second time." They do it a second time. He says, "Do it a third time." They do it a third time. The water runs around the altar. It fills the trench. In a drought, water is precious. To pour it out is a costly sign. No hidden flame will explain what happens next. No trick, no ember, no human cleverness. At the time of the evening offering, Elijah the prophet comes near and prays, "Lord, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. Hear me, Lord, hear me, that this people may know that you, Lord, are God, and that you have turned their heart back again. The prayer is simple. It seeks God's glory. It seeks the people's return. Then the fire of the Lord falls. It consumes the burnt offering. It consumes the wood. It consumes the stones. It consumes the dust. It licks up the water that is in the trench. The people fall on their faces. The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. The confession rises from the mountain like rain before rain. The fire has answered. Baal is silent. The Lord lives. The scene is powerful, but it is not chaos. It is holy revelation. The fire that falls is not wild accident. It is the answer of the covenant God, who calls his people back from wandering. After this, Elijah tells Ahab, "Get up, eat and drink, for there is the sound of abundance of rain." Ahab goes up to eat and drink. Elijah goes up to the top of Carmel. He bows himself down on the earth and puts his face between his knees. He says to his servant, "Go up now, look toward the sea." The servant goes up, looks, and says, "There is nothing." 7 times Elijah says, "Go again." Prayer continues when the sky still looks empty. On the 7th time, the servant says, "Behold, a small cloud, like a man's hand, is rising out of the sea." Small cloud, a great mercy. Elijah sends word to Ahab to prepare his chariot and go down, so the rain will not stop him. In a little while, the sky grows black with clouds and wind. There is a great rain. The dry land receives what it has lacked. Dust darkens, stones shine, leaves tremble. The sound of rain covers the land that had long waited under judgment. The hand of the Lord is on Elijah, and he runs before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. Fire has fallen. Rain has returned. The people have confessed. Yet the prophet's road is not finished. The prophet under the broom tree. Ahab tells Jezebel all that Elijah has done, and how the prophets of Baal were judged. Jezebel sends a messenger to Elijah. Her threat is clear. By the next day, she intends to make his life like theirs. The prophet who stood before hundreds on Carmel is now afraid. He rises and runs for his life. He goes to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah. He leaves his servant there. Then he goes a day's journey into the wilderness. The wilderness receives him. No crowd follows. No fire falls. No rainstorm celebrates him. Only heat, dust, silence, exhaustion, and fear. Elijah sits down under a broom tree. He asks that he might die. It is enough. Now, Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers. These are not the words of rebellion. They are the words of a faithful servant, emptied beyond his strength. Elijah has seen fire fall from heaven, yet he is tired. He has prayed rain back over the land, yet he feels alone. He has stood before kings, yet one threat from Jezebel sends his body into flight and his soul into heaviness. Scripture does not shame him. The Lord does not answer him with a lecture. An angel touches him and says, "Arise and eat." Elijah looks, and there by his head is a cake baked on coals and a jar of water. Food, water, rest. The mercy of God meets exhaustion with tenderness before explanation. Elijah eats and drinks, then lies down again. The angel of the Lord comes a second time and touches him. "Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you." The words are gentle and true. The journey is too great for you. Not because Elijah is weak in a shameful way, because Elijah is human. The work of God is greater than human strength. The road is longer than human courage can carry alone. Even prophets need bread. Even servants who have seen miracles need sleep. Even the bold can tremble. Even the faithful can collapse beneath a broom tree. Elijah rises. He eats. He drinks. He goes in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mountain of God. The road is long. The wilderness stretches around him. Day after day he walks. The sky changes over him. The heat rises and falls. The stars come out. His footsteps carry him not toward a crowd, but toward a meeting with the Lord in solitude. Horeb is a mountain of memory. There Moses had encountered the holy fire in the bush that burned and was not consumed. There Israel had received the law. There the Lord had spoken in cloud, fire, trembling, and covenant. Now Elijah comes there, weary and afraid, carrying the grief of his calling. He enters a cave and lodges there. Then the word of the Lord comes to him. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" The question is not asked because the Lord lacks knowledge. It opens the heart of the prophet. Elijah answers with the ache he has been carrying. "I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of armies. For the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. Even I only am left, and they seek my life to take it away." His words are full of zeal, grief, loneliness, and fear. He has seen Israel's sin. He has seen the altars broken. He has seen the danger faced by the prophets. He feels himself alone. Then the Lord tells him, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord." A great and strong wind tears the mountains and breaks the rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord is not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord is not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord is not in the fire. After the fire, a still small voice, a gentle whisper, a thin silence, a quietness so holy that it carries more weight than the storm. When Elijah hears it, he wraps his face in his mantle and goes out, standing at the entrance of the cave. Again, the voice comes. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Again, Elijah pours out the same grief. He has been zealous. Israel has forsaken the covenant. The altars have been thrown down. The prophets have been killed. He feels alone. The Lord answers not by denying the grief, but by giving Elijah his next steps. He is to return on his way toward the wilderness of Damascus. Hazael will be anointed king over Syria. Jehu will be anointed king over Israel. Elisha son of Shaphat will be anointed prophet in Elijah's place. The Lord's purposes will move through history, through kings and prophets, through judgment and succession. And then comes the word Elijah most needs to hear. The Lord has reserved 7,000 in Israel, all the knees which have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth which has not kissed him. Elijah is not alone. His loneliness was real, but it was not the whole truth. The Lord had faithful ones, hidden beyond Elijah's sight. Some were in caves, some were in villages, some were perhaps praying quietly in houses where no public courage could yet be seen. The prophet saw the darkness clearly, but the Lord saw the remnant completely. And in the gentle whisper, Elijah learns that God's presence is not limited to the dramatic. The Lord who answered by fire on Carmel also speaks in quietness on Horeb. The God of flame is also the God of the whisper. The God who shakes mountains also sustains tired servants with bread and water. The mantle falls on Elisha. Elijah departs from Horeb and finds Elisha son of Shaphat. Elisha is plowing. 12 yoke of oxen are before him, and he is with the 12th. It is a grounded, earthy scene after the mountain of God. No cave, no wind, no fire, no earthquake, only a field, animals, soil turning under the plow, the rhythm of labor, and a man at work. Elisha is not idle when the call comes. He is found in ordinary faithfulness. The plow cuts through earth, oxen breathe and strain. Dust rises around feet. The day is full of work. Then Elijah passes by and casts his mantle over him. The action is simple, but it changes everything. The mantle that had wrapped Elijah at Horeb now falls over Elisha in the field. Elisha understands enough to leave the oxen and run after Elijah. Please let me kiss my father and my mother, and then I will follow you. Elijah answers, Go back again, for what have I done to you? The words leave space for Elisha to count the cost. Elisha returns. He takes the yoke of oxen and sacrifices them. He boils their flesh with the instruments of the oxen and gives it to the people, and they eat. Then he rises, follows Elijah, and serves him. It is a farewell with fire, food, and finality. The tools of his former life become fuel. The oxen become a meal. The field that had defined him is left behind. Elisha does not step into public greatness at once. He begins by serving Elijah. He walks with him. He watches. He learns the roads of prophecy, not as a man grabbing honor, but as a servant receiving a mantle over time. The passing of the mantle begins quietly, not in the sky, not at the Jordan, but in a field. Many callings begin that way, with ordinary dust still on the hands. Naboth's vineyard and the cost of injustice. The days of Ahab continue, and another story reveals the sickness of his house. Naboth the Jezreelite has a vineyard in Jezreel, near the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. A vineyard is not only land, it is inheritance, it is memory, it is family labor held across generations. Vines do not grow in a day. They are planted, tended, pruned, watered, watched. A vineyard carries the patience of fathers and the hope of sons. Ahab looks at Naboth's vineyard and desires it. He says to Naboth, "Give me your vineyard, that I may have it for a garden of herbs, because it is near my house. I will give you a better vineyard for it, or if it seems good to you, I will give you its worth in money." To Ahab, it is convenient land. To Naboth, it is inheritance from the Lord. Naboth answers, "May the Lord forbid me that I should give the inheritance of my fathers to you." It is a faithful answer. He is not merely being stubborn. He is honoring the covenant pattern of the land. The inheritance is not his to trade away lightly for royal convenience. Ahab returns to his house sullen and angry. He lies on his bed. He turns away his face. He will not eat. It is a childish posture from a king with great power. Jezebel comes to him and asks why his spirit is so sad that he eats no bread. Ahab tells her about Naboth's refusal. Jezebel answers with contempt for both Naboth's conscience and Israel's law. "Do you now govern the kingdom of Israel? Arise, eat bread, and let your heart be merry. I will give you the vineyard of Naboth, the Jezreelite." Then she acts. She writes letters in Ahab's name and seals them with his seal. She sends them to the elders and nobles of Naboth's city. She commands a fast to be proclaimed and Naboth to be set on high amongst the people. Two worthless men are to bear false witness against him, accusing him of cursing God and the king. The plot is cold. It dresses murder in the clothing of public righteousness. Law is turned against justice. Religion becomes a mask for theft. Naboth is falsely accused. He is taken outside the city. He dies under the weight of wicked testimony and royal corruption. We do not linger over the death. The scripture gives enough. A righteous man is removed, so a king can take a vineyard. When Jezebel hears that Naboth is dead, she tells Ahab to arise and take possession. Ahab goes down to take the vineyard, but the Lord sees. No palace wall can hide injustice from him. No royal seal can make falsehood true. No public accusation can confuse the judge of all the earth. The word of the Lord comes to Elijah the Tishbite. He is sent to meet Ahab in Naboth's vineyard. The prophet finds the king standing in the place acquired by blood. Ahab says, "Have you found me, my enemy?" Elijah answers, "I have found you, because you have sold yourself to do that which is evil in the Lord's sight." Then Elijah speaks the word of judgment. Disaster will come on Ahab's house. Jezebel will also face judgment. The sin that seemed private, royal, and successful will not escape the Lord. The story is solemn. It teaches without needing to shout. The Lord sees the poor man's vineyard. The Lord hears the voice silenced by false witnesses. The Lord does not forget inheritance stolen by power. Ahab, hearing the words, tears his clothes. He puts sackcloth on his flesh. He fasts. He lies in sackcloth and goes softly. Then the word of the Lord comes to Elijah again. "See how Ahab humbles himself before me. Because he humbles himself before me, I will not bring the evil in his days, but in his son's days I will bring the evil on his house. Even here, mercy appears. Ahab's life has been marked by evil, yet when he humbles himself, the Lord sees even that. The story does not excuse Ahab. It does not erase Naboth's death, but it shows that the Lord is attentive even to humbled steps, even in a man who has long resisted him. Elijah's final road begins. After Ahab, his son Ahaziah reigns in Israel. Ahaziah falls through the lattice in his upper room in Samaria and becomes sick. In his illness, he sends messengers, telling them to inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron, whether he will recover. Again, the question of Israel's heart appears. Will the king seek the Lord, the God of Israel, or will he send beyond the covenant to a false god? The angel of the Lord tells Elijah the Tishbite to arise and meet the messengers. Elijah says to them, "Is it because there is no God in Israel that you go to inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron? Now therefore the Lord says, you will not come down from the bed where you have gone up, but will surely die." The messengers return to Ahaziah. He asks why they have returned. They report the man's message. The king asks what kind of man it was. They answer, "He was a hairy man with a leather belt around his waist." Ahaziah says, "It is Elijah the Tishbite." The king sends a captain of 50 with his 50 men to Elijah. They find him sitting on the top of a hill. The captain says, "Man of God," the king says, "come down." Elijah answers, "If I am a man of God, let fire come down from the sky and consume you and your 50. Fire comes down and consumes them. A second captain comes with his 50 and speaks with the same commanding tone. Again, fire comes down. These are sobering scenes. The matter at hand is not Elijah's temper. It is the king's hardened contempt for the word of the Lord. To command the prophet of God as if royal authority stands above the living God is no small thing in Israel. Then a third captain comes. This man approaches differently. He goes up, falls on his knees before Elijah, and pleads for his life and the lives of his men. "O man of God, please let my life and the life of these 50 servants of yours be precious in your sight." The angel of the Lord tells Elijah to go down with him and not be afraid. Elijah rises and goes with him to the king. He speaks the same word to Ahaziah. Because the king sent messengers to inquire of Baal-zebub, as though there were no God in Israel, he will not come down from his bed, but will surely die. Ahaziah dies according to the word of the Lord which Elijah had spoken. The ministry of Elijah has been marked by confrontations with kings, by fire, drought, rain, and the unyielding truth that the Lord alone is God. But now the story turns toward the final road. There comes a day when the Lord will take Elijah up by a whirlwind into heaven. Elijah knows something of it. Elisha knows something of it. The sons of the prophets know something of it. The air of the story changes. It becomes quieter. It becomes farewell. Elijah and Elisha set out from Gilgal. Elijah says to Elisha, "Please wait here, for the Lord has sent me as far as Bethel." Elisha answers, "As the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, I will not leave you." So they go down to Bethel. The sons of the prophets at Bethel come out to Elisha and say, "Do you know that the Lord will take away your master from your head today?" Elisha says, "Yes, I know. Hold your peace. There are truths too heavy for much speaking." Elijah says again, "Elisha, please wait here, for the Lord has sent me to Jericho." Elisha answers again, "As the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, I will not leave you." So they come to Jericho. The sons of the prophets at Jericho come near and say the same thing. "Do you know that the Lord will take away your master from your head today?" Elisha says, "Yes, I know. Hold your peace." Then Elijah says, "Please wait here, for the Lord has sent me to the Jordan." Elisha answers for the third time, "As the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, I will not leave you." So the two of them go on. 50 men of the sons of the prophets go and stand opposite them at a distance. Elijah and Elisha stand by the Jordan. The river moves before them. The final crossing is near. Elijah takes his mantle, rolls it up, and strikes the waters. The waters divide to the right and to the left. The two of them cross over on dry ground. There is a holy echo here. Israel once crossed waters by the power of the Lord. Now Elijah and Elisha cross the Jordan together, master and servant, prophet and successor, one nearing departure, the other nearing burden. When they have crossed, Elijah says to Elisha, "Ask what I shall do for you before I am taken from you." Elisha answers, "Please let a double portion of your spirit be on me." It is not greed for spectacle. It is the request of a son for the inheritance of the firstborn. Elisha knows the calling ahead is too great for human strength. He needs the Spirit who rested upon Elijah. Elijah says, "You have asked a hard thing. If you see me when I am taken from you, it will be so for you. But if not, it will not be so." They continue walking. They speak as they go. The road is ordinary beneath their feet, but heaven is near. Then, as they still go on and talk, behold, a chariot of fire and horses of fire separate the two of them. Elijah goes up by a whirlwind into heaven. Elisha sees it. He cries out, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." Then Elijah is gone from his sight. Elisha takes hold of his own clothes and tears them in 2 pieces. The grief is real. The wonder is real. The mantle of Elijah falls from him. Elisha picks it up. There is no long explanation. The old prophet is taken. The younger prophet stands by the river with a mantle in his hands. The sky has closed again. The chariot is beyond sight. The Jordan still waits. Elisha takes up the mantle. Elisha returns to the bank of the Jordan. He stands where he must now act. The mantle of Elijah is in his hands, but the question is not about cloth. It is about the presence and power of the Lord. He takes the mantle that fell from Elijah and strikes the waters. Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah? When he strikes the water, it divides to the right and to the left. Elisha crosses over. The sons of the prophets at Jericho see him from the opposite side. They say, "The spirit of Elijah rests on Elisha." They come to meet him and bow themselves to the ground before him. The mantle has passed. The Lord has not departed with Elijah. When a great servant of God is taken, the work of God does not die. The Lord is not buried with his prophets. He is not limited to one voice, one generation, one season, one mantle. Elijah is gone from sight, but the Lord remains. His word remains. His spirit rests now upon Elisha. The sons of the prophets urge Elisha to let them send 50 strong men to search for Elijah, in case the Spirit of the Lord has taken him up and cast him on some mountain or into some valley. Elisha says, "You shall not send them." But they urge him until he is ashamed to refuse, and he says, "Send them." They search for 3 days and do not find Elijah. When they return, Elisha says, "Didn't I tell you? Don't go." There is grief in the searching, but also a need to accept what the Lord has done. Elijah has been taken. Elisha remains. The men of Jericho then come to Elisha with a need. They say the situation of the city is pleasant, but the water is bad, and the land miscarries. Elisha says, "Bring me a new jar and put salt in it." They bring it to him. He goes out to the spring of the waters and throws salt into it. The Lord says, "I have healed these waters. There shall not be from there any more death or miscarrying." The waters are healed according to the word of Elisha. It is a gentle first public sign after the Jordan. Elijah had announced drought. Elisha heals water. The same Lord who closed the sky now makes a spring clean. The prophetic ministry continues not only in judgment, but in restoration. From there, Elisha goes up to Bethel. On the way, youths come out from the city and mock him. "Go up, you bald head. Go up, you bald head." The words show contempt for the prophet of the Lord, and perhaps contempt for Elijah's being taken. Elisha turns, sees them, and pronounces a curse in the name of the Lord. 2 bears come out of the woods, and judgment falls. The passage is brief and sober. It stands as a witness that the word of the Lord is not to be mocked as empty, and that contempt for the holy is not a small thing. Elisha goes from there to Mount Carmel, and from there returns to Samaria. The prophet among ordinary needs. Elisha's ministry moves among kings, armies, cities, and nations, but some of its most tender scenes happen in houses. One day, a woman from among the wives of the sons of the prophets cries to Elisha, "Her husband, who feared the Lord, has died. A creditor has come to take her 2 sons as servants to pay the debt." This is a household on the edge of losing everything. A widow, debt, 2 sons, an empty future closing in. Elisha asks, "What shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in the house?" She answers, "Your servant has nothing in the house except a pot of oil." Nothing except. So many miracles begin there, not with what is absent, but with the small thing still present. Elisha tells her to go and borrow vessels from all her neighbors, empty vessels, and not just a few. Then she is to go in, shut the door on herself and her sons, and pour oil into all those vessels, setting aside each one when it is full. She obeys. The door closes. Inside the house are the widow, her sons, the small pot of oil, and borrowed vessels waiting like silent questions. She pours. Oil flows. One vessel fills. Another is brought. It fills. Another. And other. The sons keep bringing vessels to her. The oil keeps flowing. The sound is quiet and beautiful. Oil pouring into clay, mercy filling emptiness. Debt being answered not by royal decree, but by hidden provision behind a closed door. At last she says to her son, "Bring me another vessel." He says, "There isn't another vessel." Then the oil stops. She comes and tells the man of God. Elisha says, "Go, sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your sons live on the rest." The miracle is practical. It pays debt. It preserves children. It gives life beyond crisis. God's mercy enters the accounting of a poor household and rewrites the ending. Another day, Elisha passes to Shunem. There is a notable woman there, and she persuades him to eat bread. Whenever he passes by, he turns in there to eat. Hospitality becomes holy rhythm. She says to her husband that she perceives Elisha is a holy man of God who passes by continually. She suggests they make a little room on the wall for him and place in it a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp, so that when he comes, he can turn in there. A bed, a table, a chair, a lamp. Few details in Scripture feel so gentle. The room is simple, but full of care. It does not glitter. It welcomes. It gives the prophet rest, a place to sit, a place to eat, a place to read or pray by lamplight, a place to sleep. Elisha comes one day and turns into the room. He asks Gehazi, his servant, what should be done for the woman. She has shown great care. Should he speak for her to the king or to the captain of the army? She answers that she dwells among her own people. She is not asking for status. Gehazi observes that she has no son, and her husband is old. Elisha calls her. She stands in the door. At this season, when the time comes around, you will embrace a son. She answers, "No, my lord. You man of God, do not lie to your servant." The promise touches a place too tender for careless hope, but the woman conceives and bears a son at that season, as Elisha had said. The child grows. One day he goes out to his father among the reapers. He says to his father, "My head, my head." The father tells a servant to carry him to his mother. The child sits on her knees until noon. Then he dies. The mother carries him up and lays him on the bed of the man of God. She shuts the door and goes out. Her faith is quiet and fierce. She calls to her husband for a servant and a donkey, so that she may run to the man of God and return. Her husband asks why she will go today, since it is neither new moon nor Sabbath. She says, "It's all right." She saddles the donkey and tells the servant to drive on and not slow down unless she says so. At Mount Carmel, Elisha sees her far off. He sends Gehazi to ask whether it is well with her husband, and with the child. She says, "It is well. But when she comes to the man of God, she catches hold of his feet. Gehazi comes near to push her away, but Elisha says to leave her alone, for her soul is troubled within her, and the Lord has hidden it from him. Then her grief speaks. Did I ask my Lord for a son? Didn't I say, do not deceive me? Elisha sends Gehazi with his staff, but the mother refuses to leave Elisha. As the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, I will not leave you. So Elisha rises and follows her. Gehazi goes ahead and lays the staff on the child's face, but there is no voice and no hearing. He returns to meet Elisha and says the child has not awakened. When Elisha comes into the house, the child is dead and lying on his bed. He goes in, shuts the door on them both, and prays to the Lord. He stretches himself upon the child. The child's flesh grows warm. Elisha walks in the house once back and forth, then goes up and stretches himself upon him again. The child sneezes 7 times. The child opens his eyes. Elisha calls Gehazi and tells him to call the Shunammite woman. She comes in. He says, pick up your son. She falls at his feet and bows to the ground. Then she picks up her son and goes out. The room with the bed, table, chair, and lamp has become a place of life restored. Hospitality has become memory. The God who gave the child has also given him back mercy, food, and healing. Elisha returns to Gilgal, and there is a famine in the land. The sons of the prophets sit before him. He tells his servant to put on the great pot and boil stew for them. One goes out into the field to gather herbs and finds a wild vine. He gathers wild gourds, fills his garment, comes back, and slices them into the pot, though they do not know what they are. They pour out the stew for the men to eat. As they are eating, they cry out, Man of God, there is death in the pot. They cannot eat it. Elisha says, Then bring meal. He casts it into the pot and says, Pour out for the people, that they may eat. There is nothing harmful in the pot. A meal that had become dangerous is made safe. The community eats. A man comes from Baal Shalisha, bringing bread of the first fruits to the man of God, 20 loaves of barley and fresh ears of grain in his sack. Elisha says, Give to the people, that they may eat. His servant asks how he should set this before 100 men. Elisha says again, Give the people, that they may eat, for the Lord says, They will eat, and will have some left over. So he sets it before them. They eat, and have some left over, according to the word of the Lord. Bread in the hands of obedience becomes enough. Then the story widens beyond Israel again. Naaman, captain of the army of the king of Syria, is a great man with his master, honorable, because by him the Lord had given victory to Syria. He is also a mighty man of valor, but he has leprosy. In Naaman's house there is a little Israelite girl, taken captive by Syrian raiders. She serves Naaman's wife. This child has lost home, land, and family nearness, yet she carries a quiet witness. She says to her mistress, I wish that my Lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria. Then he would heal him of his leprosy. The word of a servant girl begins the journey of a commander. Naaman tells his lord. The king of Syria sends a letter to the king of Israel, along with gifts. When the king of Israel reads the letter, asking him to heal Naaman, he tears his clothes, thinking the king of Syria seeks a quarrel. Elisha hears that the king has torn his clothes and sends word, "Why have you torn your clothes? Let him come now to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel." Naaman comes with his horses and chariots and stands at the door of Elisha's house. Elisha does not come out with ceremony. He sends a messenger. "Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall come again to you, and you shall be clean." Naaman is angry. He expected the prophet to come out, stand, call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the place, and heal the leper. He asks whether the rivers of Damascus are not better than all the waters of Israel. Could he not wash in them and be clean? He turns away in rage. Pride nearly keeps him sick, but his servants come near and speak wisely. "My father, if the prophet had asked you to do some great thing, wouldn't you have done it? How much rather then, when he says to you, 'Wash and be clean'?" Naaman listens. He goes down and dips himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God. His flesh comes again like the flesh of a little child. He is clean. The commander who arrived with horses, chariots, gifts, and expectations receives healing through humble obedience in a muddy river. He returns to Elisha and stands before him. "See now, I know that there is no God in all the earth, but in Israel." Naaman offers a gift, but Elisha refuses. Naaman asks for earth to take with him, for he will no longer offer burnt offering or sacrifice to other gods, but to the Lord. His understanding is not yet complete, but his confession is real. The God of Israel has made himself known to a Syrian commander through the witness of a captive girl, the word of a prophet, and the water of the Jordan. But Gehazi, Elisha's servant, looks upon the refused gifts with greed. He runs after Naaman and lies, saying his master has sent him to ask for silver and garments for 2 young men of the sons of the prophets. Naaman gladly gives more than requested. Gehazi hides the gifts. Then he stands before Elisha. Elisha asks, "Where did you come from, Gehazi?" He answers, "Your servant went nowhere." But Elisha knows. "Didn't my heart go with you when the man turned from his chariot to meet you? Is it a time to receive money, garments, olive groves, vineyards, sheep, cattle, male servants, and female servants?" The consequence falls on Gehazi. Grace had been given freely to Naaman, and Gehazi tried to profit from it through deceit. The story warns quietly that the gifts of God are not merchandise, and the servant of the prophet must not turn mercy into gain. The eyes opened at Dothan. The sons of the prophet say to Elisha, "See now, the place where we dwell before you is too small for us. Please let us go to the Jordan, and each take a beam from there, and let us make a place there for us to dwell." Elisha says, "Go." One asks him to be pleased to go with them. He says, "I will go." They come to the Jordan and cut down wood. As one is cutting a beam, the axe head falls into the water. He cries, "Oh no, my master, it was borrowed." The loss is small compared with kings and wars, but not small to the man who borrowed it. Elisha asks where it fell. The man shows him the place. Elisha cuts down a stick and throws it there, and the iron floats. "Take it," he says. The man reaches out his hand and takes it. The God who sends fire and opens rivers also cares about a borrowed axe head. Nothing is too ordinary to be beneath his notice when it touches the life of his servant. Then the king of Syria wars against Israel. He consults with his servants, planning where his camp will be. But Elisha sends word to the king of Israel, warning him not to pass such a place, for the Syrians are coming down there. More than once, the king of Israel is saved by the prophet's warning. The heart of the king of Syria is troubled. He thinks someone among his servants is betraying him. But one of them says, "No, my lord, O king." Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom. The king commands them to find where Elisha is. He is told, "Behold, he is in Dothan." So the king sends horses, chariots, and a great army there. They come by night and surround the city. Early in the morning, Elisha's servant rises and goes out. He sees the army surrounding the city with horses and chariots. Fear fills him. "Oh, no, my master. What shall we do?" Elisha answers, "Don't be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them." Then Elisha prays, "Lord, please open his eyes, that he may see." The Lord opens the eyes of the young man. He sees. The mountain is full of horses and chariots of fire around Elisha. The army of Syria is visible. The army of heaven is more real. The servant had not been wrong that danger was near. He had been blind to the greater nearness of God's help. This is one of the most beautiful moments in the story. The morning at Dothan is still. The city is surrounded. A servant trembles. A prophet prays. And suddenly the unseen is seen. Chariots of fire fill the mountain, not because Elisha has just summoned them into existence, but because they were already there. The prayer did not create the help. It opened the eyes of the fearful to behold it. As the Syrians come down to him, Elisha prays that the Lord would strike them with blindness. The Lord does so. Elisha then leads them to Samaria. When they come into Samaria, Elisha prays, "Lord, open these men's eyes, that they may see." The Lord opens their eyes, and behold, they are in the middle of Samaria. The king of Israel asks Elisha whether he should strike them. Elisha says no. "Would you strike those whom you have taken captive with your sword and with your bow? Set bread and water before them, that they may eat and drink and go to their master." So the king prepares a great feast for them. They eat, they drink, they are sent away. They go to their master. The bands of Syria stop raiding the land of Israel for a time. Elisha's mercy is striking. He does not use heavenly sight to boast. He does not use captured enemies for slaughter. he commands food. Bread and water become weapons of peace. The prophet, surrounded by chariots of fire, chooses mercy at the table. Famine, fear, and unexpected deliverance. Afterward, Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, gathers all his army and besieges Samaria. The city is closed in. Food becomes scarce. Prices rise beyond reason. Despair presses into streets and houses. The siege presses hard on the city, bringing people to a desperate low place where hunger bends minds and breaks hearts. The king of Israel tears his clothes, and beneath them the people see sackcloth on his body. He is grieving, but his anger turns toward Elisha. The king sends a messenger. Elisha sits in his house, and the elders sit with him. Before the messenger arrives, Elisha knows and speaks of it. The king himself comes and says, "Behold, this evil is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer?" Then Elisha speaks the word of the Lord. Hear the Lord's word. The Lord says, "Tomorrow about this time, a measure of fine flour will be sold for a shekel, and 2 measures of barley for a shekel, in the gate of Samaria." An officer on whose hand the king leans answers with unbelief, "Behold, if the Lord made windows in heaven, could this thing be?" Elisha says he will see it with his eyes, but will not eat of it. At the entrance of the gate are 4 men with leprosy. They say to one another, "Why do we sit here until we die?" If they enter the city, famine is there. If they sit still, they die. So they decide to go to the camp of the Syrians. If the Syrians spare them, they live. If they kill them, they die. At twilight, they rise and go to the Syrian camp. When they come to the outermost part of the camp, no one is there. The Lord has made the Syrian army hear the sound of chariots, horses, and a great army. The Syrians said to one another that the king of Israel had hired kings against them. They rose and fled in the twilight, leaving tents, horses, donkeys, and the camp as it was. The 4 men enter a tent. They eat and drink. They carry away silver, gold, and clothing, and hide it. They return and enter another tent, carrying things away and hiding them. Then conscience awakens. We aren't doing right. Today is a day of good news, and we keep silent. If we wait until morning light, punishment will overtake us. Now therefore come, let's go and tell the king's household. Good news must be shared. The men return and call to the gatekeepers of the city, telling them what they have found. The news goes in to the king's household. At first, the king suspects a trap. He thinks the Syrians may have hidden in the field, waiting for Israel to come out. Servants advise sending men to see. They take horses and follow the trail. The road is full of garments and vessels thrown away by the Syrians in their haste. The messengers return and tell the king. Then the people go out and plunder the camp of the Syrians. Fine flour and barley are sold according to the word of the Lord. The officer who had doubted sees it, but in the crush at the gate he dies and does not eat of it, just as Elisha had said. The deliverance is unexpected. No battle is described. No human army wins the day. The Lord fills the ears of the enemy with a sound and a starving city wakes to provision. The 4 men at the gate become messengers of good news. Those who had been outside the city's comfort become the first to find mercy waiting in abandoned tents. The woman restored, and the word still moving. Elisha speaks to the woman whose son he had restored to life. He tells her to arise and go with her household to stay wherever she can, because the Lord has called for a famine, and it will come on the land for 7 years. The woman obeys. She goes with her household and lives in the land of the Philistines 7 years. At the end of 7 years, she returns from the land of the Philistines and goes out to appeal to the king for her house and land. At that very moment, the king is talking with Gehazi, the servant of the man of God. He says, "Please tell me all the great things that Elisha has done." Gehazi is telling the king how Elisha restored a dead child to life. As he is telling the story, behold, the woman whose son was restored comes to appeal to the king for her house and land. Gehazi says, "My lord, O king, this is the woman, and this is her son, whom Elisha restored to life." The king asks the woman, and she tells him. Then the king appoints an officer for her, saying that all that was hers should be restored, including all the fruits of the field since the day she left the land until now. Providence is gentle here. The woman who once made room for the prophet now finds the Lord making room for her restoration. Her story is being told at the exact moment she arrives. The God who restored her son now restores her land. Elisha's ministry also reaches into the affairs of nations. He comes to Damascus when Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, is sick. The king is told that the man of God has come there. He sends Hazael with a gift to inquire of the Lord through Elisha, asking whether he will recover from his sickness. Hazael comes with a heavy gift, carrying the wealth of Damascus. He stands before Elisha and asks the question. Elisha tells him that the king may recover, yet the Lord has shown him that he will surely die. Then Elisha fixes his gaze and weeps. Hazael asks, "Why does my Lord weep?" Elisha answers that he knows the evil Hazael will do to the children of Israel. Hazael is startled, but the word spoken is heavy. The royal judgment sections that follow in these chapters are serious and often severe. Kings rise, houses fall. The word given earlier to Elijah moves forward through history. Hazael becomes king of Syria. Jehu is anointed through a young prophet sent by Elisha. Judgment comes on the house of Ahab. The consequences of idolatry and injustice unfold across thrones and battlefields. We hold this truth reverently and do not linger over the weight of violence. The Lord's word does not fail. What he spoke in the days of Elijah continues moving in the days of Elisha. Kings may think history belongs to them, but the word of the Lord outlives every palace. Royal houses rise with noise and fall into silence. Armies march and vanish. Thrones pass from one man to another, but the Lord remains. His justice remains. His mercy remains. His covenant purpose remains. Elisha's final days. Years pass. Elisha grows old. The prophet who once crossed the Jordan with Elijah's mantle, who healed waters, filled jars with oil, raised the Shunammite's son, healed Naaman, opened a servant's eyes, fed enemies, and spoke to kings, becomes sick with the illness from which he will die. Even prophets die. Even those through whom life was restored must come at last to their own final weakness. Joash, king of Israel, comes down to him and weeps over his face. He says, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." The words echo Elisha's own cry when Elijah was taken. Now the king recognizes that Elisha himself has been a defense for Israel greater than horses and chariots. The prophet lying sick is in truth one of the Lord's mighty gifts to the nation. Elisha tells the king to take bow and arrows. The king takes them. Elisha tells him to put his hand on the bow. He does. Elisha lays his hands on the king's hand. Then he says, "Open the window eastward." The king opens it. Elisha says, "Shoot." He shoots. Elisha says, "The Lord's arrow of victory, even the arrow of victory over Syria, for you will strike the Syrians in Aphek until you have consumed them." Then Elisha tells him to take the arrows and strike the ground. The king strikes 3 times and stops. The man of God is troubled with him, saying he should have struck 5 or 6 times. Then he would have struck Syria until he had consumed it. Now he will strike Syria only 3 times. Even at the edge of death, Elisha's prophetic word is living. His body is weak. The word of the Lord is not weak. Then Elisha dies, and they bury him. The story gives no grand funeral speech. The prophet's earthly ministry comes to rest. Moabite raiding bands come into the land at the coming in of the year. As men are burying a man, they see a raiding band, and they cast the man into the tomb of Elisha. When the man touches the bones of Elisha, he revives and stands on his feet. This final sign is holy and strange. It is not horror. It is not superstition. It is a brief and mysterious witness that the God who worked life through Elisha had not been exhausted by Elisha's death. Even the place where the prophet's bones rested became, by the will of God, a sign that life belongs to the Lord. Elisha is gone. Elijah is gone. Ahab is gone. Jezebel is gone. Ahaziah is gone. Kings have risen and fallen. But the word of the Lord remains alive. Closing reflection. The story of Elijah and Elisha is wide as a storm cloud and tender as a lamp in a small room. It begins in a darkened kingdom where Ahab and Jezebel lead Israel deeper into idolatry, and the land itself becomes dry beneath a closed sky. It follows Elijah to the brook Chariots, where ravens bring bread and meat, and a prophet learns dependence in hiding. It follows him to Zarephath, where a widow with a handful of flour and a little oil discovers that the jar does not run out and the jug does not fail. It enters the grief of that same house, where a dead child is restored to life, and a mother learns that the word of the Lord in Elijah's mouth is truth. It climbs Mount Carmel, where the prophets of Baal cry out and receive no answer, while Elijah repairs the altar of the Lord with 12 stones, drenches the sacrifice with water, and prays simply that the people may know the Lord is God. It watches the fire fall. It hears the people cry, "The Lord, He is God." It looks toward the sea until a small cloud rises like a man's hand, and the long drought ends in rain. But the story also sits beneath the broom tree. It does not hide Elijah's weariness. It lets us see that a servant may be faithful and still become afraid, may be brave and still become tired, may call down fire and still need bread, water, and sleep. The Lord meets Elijah there, not with shame, but with care. The journey is too great for him, so God feeds him. The story climbs Horeb and listens. The wind comes, but the Lord is not in the wind. The earthquake comes, but the Lord is not in the earthquake. The fire comes, but the Lord is not in the fire. Then comes the still small voice, the gentle whisper, the holy quiet. There, Elijah learns that God's presence is not limited to the dramatic. The Lord who answers by flame also speaks in quietness. The Lord who shakes mountains also knows the lonely heart of his prophet. Then the mantle falls on Elisha. A field becomes a doorway. A plowman becomes a prophet. Elisha leaves the oxen and follows Elijah, serving before succeeding, walking before inheriting, waiting before receiving. The story passes through Naboth's vineyard, where the Lord sees injustice hidden behind royal power and false accusation. It reminds us that God sees the stolen field, the silenced man, the corrupt court, and the humbled king. Then it walks the final road, Gilgal, Bethel, Jericho, Jordan, again and again. Elijah tells Elisha to stay. Again and again, Elisha refuses. As the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, I will not leave you. The Jordan opens, the prophets cross, the chariot of fire appears. Elijah is taken up in the whirlwind. Elisha cries out, the mantle falls, and the work continues. Elisha returns to the Jordan and asks, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" The water opens. The sons of the prophets recognize that the spirit of Elijah rests on him. From there, Elisha's ministry flows into the needs of ordinary lives. Bad water is healed. A widow's oil fills borrowed vessels until debt is paid and sons are preserved. A Shunammite woman makes a small room with a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp, and receives a son she did not dare to hope for. When grief enters that room, the Lord gives life again. A poisoned pot is made safe. Bread feeds 100 men with some left over. Naaman, the proud commander from Syria, is made clean in the Jordan after learning to obey a humble word. A borrowed axe head floats. A frightened servant sees the mountain full of horses and chariots of fire. Enemies are not slaughtered, but fed and sent home. A starving city receives unexpected deliverance when the Lord makes an army flee at twilight. 4 men outside the gate discover good news and realize it must be shared. The Shunammite woman returns after famine and finds her story being told at the very moment she comes to ask for restoration. The word of the Lord moves through kings and nations, through sorrowful prophecies and severe judgments, through the rise and fall of houses. And at the end, Elisha lies sick with the illness from which he will die. Even then, the word remains. The arrows are shot. The final sign is given. The prophet dies. And still, in one last mysterious witness, life is connected with him by the power of the God he served. So what remains when the story grows quiet? The fire on Carmel has faded. The brook Cherith is quiet. The ravens have flown beyond sight. The widow's jars rest in memory. The altar stones on Carmel no longer glow. The rain cloud has passed inland. The broom tree stands empty in the wilderness. The wind, earthquake, and fire have gone. The gentle whisper remains. The field where Elisha plowed has returned to silence. Naboth's vineyard has borne witness before God. The Jordan flows again in its course. The chariot of fire has gone beyond sight. The mantle has fallen. The room in Shunammite, with its bed, table, chair, and lamp, is still. The jars of oil are full in the memory of mercy. The waters of Jericho are healed. The mountains of Dothan still hold the secret of unseen help. The arrows have struck the ground. The prophet has been buried, but the Lord remains. His word remains. His mercy remains. His justice remains. His care for widows remains. His nearness to the weary remains. His power to open eyes remains. His ability to feed, heal, restore, and guide remains. Tonight, as the story settles, let your own heart rest in that. The God who fed Elijah in hiding sees hidden places still. The God who heard the widow hears quiet houses still. The God who answered by fire is not absent when no fire is seen. The God who spoke in a gentle whisper is not silent because he is quiet. The God who passed the mantle from Elijah to Elisha knows how to carry his work beyond one season into another. The God who opened the eyes of the servant at Dothan knows every fear that rises when trouble surrounds you. Those who are with God are more than those who are against his people. Even when you cannot see the mountain full of fire, the Lord sees. Even when the brook dries, the Lord has another word. Even when the jar seems almost empty, the Lord can make enough. Even when grief enters the room, the Lord is Lord of life. Even when cities tremble, the Lord can bring deliverance in ways no one planned. Even when prophets die, the word of the Lord does not die. So let your breathing slow. Let the story become quiet inside you. Let the fire fade into warmth. Let the rain become a soft sound in memory. Let the Jordan grow still. Let the mountain of God stand beneath the stars. Let the little room in Shunammite glow with its lamp. Let the chariots of fire rest beyond the veil of sight. This has been the Shepherd's Bible. And in the quiet of this night, he is still near. So let the story settle into rest. The God who fed his servant in the wilderness, who spoke in holy silence, who opened the eyes of the frightened, and who filled empty vessels with mercy, is not far from those who call upon him tonight. Rest now. The Lord is near, and the night is held in his peace.